The US wouldn't come right out and say Russia's putting a nuclear weapon into space, but Russia could be putting a nuclear weapon into space.
There was a capacity to launch a system into space that could theoretically do something that was damaging.
That was Joe Biden a few weeks ago, answering a question about Russian plans to build a new weapon that could disable satellites. The notion that this might be a nuclear weapon came from journalists and their sources.
Cryptic warning from the House Intelligence Committee chairman.
Referring to a foreign military capability.
Russian nukes in space.
Check this ABC headline 2 days before Biden spoke about Russia wanting a nuclear weapon in space. And then a little further down, this would not be to drop a nuclear weapon onto Earth, but rather to possibly use against satellites. CNN ran a similar story after Biden made his statement about Russia's nuclear space weapon and goes on to suggest it might be a nuclear EMP. So what is this thing? If it is a nuclear weapon, how would it work? And to be honest, there are already ways to shoot down satellites. Why go nuclear in the first place? So the first theory is that this is literally just a space nuke, just like we've seen on land. Except this could either be launched from Earth into outer space to target the satellite, blow it up, or it could be orbiting the Earth, maybe on a satellite of its own, ready to launch at will. And there are plenty of targets to choose from. In this animation, every line represents a satellite's orbit. Most are American, and there are thousands of them.
We've become increasingly reliant on satellites for our day-to-day lives.
Our phones, our cars, checking the weather, watching the big game on TV, using a credit card, tracking a flight, they all rely on the satellites orbiting Earth.
Even military weather forecasts, so we know the ground moisture content of the soil that our troops will be landing on, so we don't get stuck in the mud.
Militaries rely on satellites to gather intelligence, take pictures, detect missile launches, manage communication, guide drones to their targets. And the way I've seen it described, where you might think of like a regular missile attack against a satellite as a 1 versus 1, a nuclear attack would be a 1 versus many.
So one of the effects of a nuclear explosion is the so-called electromagnetic pulse, EMP. And basically what this is a huge burst of electromagnetic radiation that can induce enormous voltages in electronic devices and basically simply fry the device. Render it completely inoperative.
And we know about nuclear EMP because the US has detonated a space nuke before.
Missile preparation for the July launch of the Starfish prime shot was one aspect of an extensive team effort.
July 9th, 1962, the US launched a 1.4 megaton bomb called Starfish Prime high up into the air over the Pacific Ocean. This was about 400 kilometers up, which, just for reference, is about the same altitude where you'll find the International Space Station zipping around Earth. So this is a legit space nuke. It blew up.
One more answer was needed. How feasible was it to test nuclear weapons in outer space?
And the power of the nuke's electromagnetic pulse exceeded all predictions. Many of the ships and planes and instruments monitoring the blast, they were damaged. More than 1,000 kilometers away in Hawaii, hundreds of street lamps got knocked out. Burglar alarms went off. Their telephone network was severely damaged.
But the longer term effect is it creates a radiation belt in Earth orbit that is basically poison to all the other satellites up there.
The radioactive fallout lasted months, just kind of floating around. The world's first telecommunications satellite, NASA's Telstar 1, it got fried. Its solar panels decayed, and it went completely dead within months.
It's essentially a suicide attack The Russians would be taking out their own satellites and the satellites of a lot of other countries if they ever used a weapon like this.
I think Russia's thinking is, if it set off a nuclear weapon in space or more than one nuclear weapon in space, and that indiscriminately destroyed a whole load of satellites, both Russian and American, the United States would suffer from that a lot more than Russia would do.
So it's more of a weapon, that would be used in very dire circumstances as a last-ditch effort.
I just don't believe in that scenario. I just find it extraordinary, non-strategic.
For those who think theory number one is just too crazy, the second theory is that we're not talking about a conventional nuclear bomb at all. We're talking about nuclear power. A reactor, a generator. Russia launching one of those into space could give it an immense advantage.
Reports are they've looked at designs that would produce up to 1 megawatt of power, which is a tremendous amount of power on a satellite, which could then power other payloads on the satellite.
Strapping a nuclear reactor to a conventional satellite is a bit like taking a motorcycle and adding a jet engine. It's loud, it's obnoxious, and it opens up possibilities.
With that much power, you could actually have a communication system, a radio essentially, that blasts out a signal that's much stronger than any other signal in space.
He's talking about signal jamming. So typically, when we think about conventional satellite jammers, we're really just talking about generating noise. So if you're trying to hear my voice, but someone else is shouting loud enough to drown me out, that's jamming. The louder noise is outcompeting the quieter stuff entering your ear. Satellite jamming works the same way. If you can hop on the same frequency as you're trying to jam and just blare a whole bunch of electronic noise, then you've effectively disabled the satellite you're targeting and everything that satellite was responsible for. Communications, intel, weapons guidance, nuclear command and control, everything. The tough part is generating a signal loud enough, strong enough to overpower the signal that you're jamming. That's what Russia might be up to.
But basically, you're trying to swamp the signal in a huge amount of noise. So either the satellite can't receive signals from somewhere else, or some receiver on the ground or another satellite can't receive that information, again, because the noise dwarfs the signal.
And if you've got a nuclear reactor powering it, you have a much stronger signal that you could be broadcasting as well, which overpowers other signals more easily.
So imagine you're a Russian commander ordering a strike on Ukraine's defenses. You jam their communications. They can't coordinate, act in unison as effectively. Ukrainian GPS disabled. Precision munitions suddenly aren't so precise. That's the kind of advantage Washington and its allies fear. Beyond the black hole of all we don't know about this classified intelligence on whatever anti-satellite space weapon Russia may or may not be developing, the other big unknown is what cards Putin holds in his hand. He immediately dismissed all of this, including what the US president himself told the world.
Мы категорически всегда были против, и сейчас против размещения ядерного оружия в космосе.
To be clear, putting a nuclear weapon into space would be a violation of international law. But Putin is not shy about threatening nuclear war.
Что все это реально грозит конфликтом с использованием ядерного оружия, а значит уничтожением цивилизации. Они чего, этого не понимают, что ли?
Understanding how far the Russians are willing to go to restore, in some cases, or to strengthen their nuclear deterrent signaling, and what kind of technological capabilities they have or they can develop.
There is disagreement, even within expert circles, what exactly Russia's capabilities are and what Putin may be planning. But just about everyone agrees a nuclear space weapon of any variety would be a serious breach of international stability and a massive threat to which the United States does not have a singularly effective answer.